Alright, today is Halloween, and in the spirit of Halloween, I'm going to do something. I really wanted to do this last year, but I forgot. I didn't have the opportunity. But one of the things that people always ask me as a police officer is, what is the most disgusting thing that you have ever encountered? And I think that I have a story that I always tell. And I think Halloween is the perfect time to tell the story because it's a story about responding to a call about a dead guy. And it was the most disgusting call for service I've ever had in my entire life. The craziest thing about it is the dead guy wasn't the scary part. This particular night, I was working third shift back then. This was years ago. Probably 2015, 2016, maybe further back. I can't quite remember. But I was driving the wagon that night and I had a partner. My partner was a female and she had just returned home from maternity leave. This was probably her first week back to work. And we got a call about an overdose. Someone called in and said that their son was in the basement, overdosed, unresponsive, and they were refusing to do CPR. So this call actually starts off kind of funny. It's one of those things that happens. It's happened to everybody that's a police officer. You know, we went lights and sirens. We went screaming down the road, and we were talking about the call as we were responding. And we actually went to the wrong house. The first house that we went to was on the wrong street altogether. We went to the correct address, but we go up to the house. We're banging on the doors. There's nobody in there, and it was a boarded up vacant house. Which was strange to us to begin with. But, you know, we get there, we're like, okay, whatever. Homeless people go into vacant houses all the time and overdose, so this might be the place. We're banging on the door. We're not getting a response. So we asked the dispatcher, hey, radio, can you get a hold of the caller and have them come to the door? We're here. We're not getting an answer. And the dispatcher comes over the air and says, the caller is saying that the fire department is already there. The medics are on scene and they're already working on them. That's when we kind of looked around. We're like, whoops, we're on the wrong street. So the area where I work, every street is a one-way street. So every other street is like northbound, southbound, you know, and we got on a southbound street, but it was the wrong southbound street. We didn't look at the sign. It is what it is. So we had to jump in the truck and go screaming over to this house. By the time we got there, all of the medics and everybody were already walking out the door. They told us that they gave us the pronounced time. So we aired the pronounced time. And we talked to the family. You know, we were sincere with them, give them our condolences, let them know that we're going to be there to walk them through the process, and that we have to go inside for a minute and check on the body. They tell us that he's down in the basement, and that's basically all we know. I think the firefighters gave us a little heads up. They said, hey, it's kind of gross in there. So we go to the door, and the minute the door, you get up on the porch, you could smell this house. It smelled awful. And the smell was a combination of human odor mixed with probably decades of animal waste in this house. It was like a house where you could tell there were cats and dogs that had been in that house for years and had been using the bathroom in that house. It was nasty. We walked in, and I think I started walking in slowly. I had to let my eyes adjust, and I was looking for furniture and stuff in the room, so I wouldn't bump into anything. I remember with a little bit of residual light from like a TV or something that was going, because there was no lights on inside, I could see bugs. There was gnats and flies and stuff flying around this house. And in the area where I work, it's very common to have fly tape hanging from the ceiling. And this ceiling, as I looked up, I could see rows of fly tape hanging from the ceiling. If you don't know what fly tape is, it's a fly trap that comes in a little thing that, I don't know, a small canister like a pill bottle. You attach it to the ceiling and then you pull down on this thing, and it's a sticky tape that attracts the flies. The flies get on this tape and then they die. These people had dozens of rows of fly tape that had dead flies all over it. And instead of taking the one thing of fly tape down and putting up another one, they just continued to hang rows of fly tape. So I'm walking into this house, I'm looking up at the ceiling, and there's bugs flying around me, and one of my major thoughts is, don't bump your head on a fly tape, because I didn't want to get fly tape stuck to the side of my head. I had hair back then, but regardless, you don't want to stick your face on fly tape. So I'm walking very slowly, looking around at this stuff. The smell is nauseating. The sights are nauseating. It's absolutely horrible. About that time, I remember, when you walk into a building with a partner, you can kind of sense where your partner is. And I was only like 8 to 10 feet into this house, and I just had that sense that my partner wasn't with me. So I turned over my shoulder to look, and she's standing in the doorway looking at me. She's got this look on her face like, I can't come in. And, she just came back from maternity leave. A woman's sense of smell, a lot of things happen to that when they're pregnant. I had two kids at the time, so I understood where she was coming from. I told her, you know what, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. So I continue to walk into this house, and the floor under my feet had a strange texture. I couldn't figure out what I was walking on, and it was like hard. It was a hard floor, but there was texture, and it wasn't hardwood. I didn't know what I was stepping on, and then I thought, oh crap, I just stepped on like dog crap or something like that. So I get my flashlight out and I turn my flashlight on. I look down at the ground. The floor was carpeted, but it didn't look like carpet anymore. This floor, like I said, when you walk into the house, or when you even approach the house, you're hit in the face with the stench of decade upon decade upon decade of animal feces and animal waste in this house. As I looked down at the floor, it looked like I was walking on a dried up creek bed. You got those small river stones that are at the bottom of a creek. If you've ever walked on the base of a dried out creek bed, you kind of know that feeling on your feet, that you got little pebbles sticking up and little ones that are sunk down in a little bit further. That's what the floor felt like. And I looked down, and you could see the carpet was all matted up into these little circular type patterns, and they had become hard. The reason for that is because, just like my sense of smell had indicated when I was walking into the house, my eyes could now confirm that this carpet had not been cleaned in decades. This was probably some old, really tall shag carpet from the 70s, 60s or 70s. And these people had dogs and cats over the decades that would go to the bathroom on their floor, and they wouldn't clean up after them. So this carpet had become so matted up that it was like hard clumps of carpet. And, as you walked across the floor, you could kind of hear your boot sticking to the floor and coming off the floor. It was absolutely disgusting. One of the worst things I've ever seen. But now at this point, I've got my flashlight on. Once you turn on your flashlight, you tend to leave your flashlight on because your eyes are now adjusting to that light. There's that, plus the fact that the house was so disgusting that I actually wanted the extra light to make sure that I didn't bump into something gross or brush up against a wall, or God forbid, if there's some kind of animal in there, I wanted to know what I was walking into. So my flashlight is on. I'm pointing it at the ground. I'm walking. Well, when the flashlight hits the ground and radiates up, you start to get shadows on the walls around you. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw something moving on the wall. I didn't know what it was, but there was definitely something moving. And I swear to God, it took me 8 minutes to get through the first 2 rooms of this house. It felt like an absolute eternity. But over here, next to my head, I can see something moving. I didn't know what it was, and it wasn't moving it wasn't a bat, it wasn't a bird, it wasn't something flying. And there's no furniture next to me, so there's no reason an object should be here. And I could sense it, and I could see it out of the periphery of my eye moving a little bit. And I didn't know what it was. It terrified me. I looked over, and these people had a giant wall-size aquarium with, you know, branches, like large branches and stuff in there. And inside that was a python, a bull python snake that they had as a pet that was every bit of 6 to 7 feet long. This thing was this big around, and it was looking at me through the glass as I walked through, because I turned on my flashlight and it was up, you know, so they're nocturnal. It was awake, and it had climbed up the branch and was looking at me through the glass. Thank God that thing was under glass. And I'll never forget that moment. So I had walked through the entryway, which was like their living room, and then you walk into a what should be a dining room, but it was just a hoarder house, so it was just full of garbage and stuff, with this python climbing up the wall. And then I turn to the right, I go in the kitchen, and the kitchen was a very tiny kitchen, probably about the size of my recording space right here. There was a stove and a refrigerator, some cabinets, and the first thing I noticed, because I'm looking at the ground with my flashlight, the first thing I noticed was that the floor was uneven. The stove was sitting on this floor, and it had not moved for decades. And the floor was so rotten that the stove was actually leaning, and like the corner of the stove was probably a good 3 inches lower than the other part of the stove that was probably on top of like a joist. The stove was sinking into the floor, and there was pots of dirty dishes on the stove that had food from God knows how long. When you looked into the pots, you know, you just see this brown, what used to be liquid that was in these pots, and now has like a thick film over the top. Dishes and stuff hanging out of the pots. The counters were covered in food, like potato chips and Cheerios and stuff like that. Just open bags of pasta, macaroni, like uncooked macaroni, on the counters, on the floors, everywhere. There was not a clean centimeter of space in this whole house. When you go through the kitchen, I hook a right into the kitchen, and then I hook another right, and that's where the basement stairs are. You know, you turn on my flashlight, I'm looking down the basement stairs, and it's a very narrow staircase, because a lot of these houses in the area where I live are 120, 130 years old. The basements are not necessarily concrete. They're dug out of old dirt and mud and compacted. Old school basements with low ceilings. So you're going down this narrow staircase. You look at the steps. A lot of basements in the area where I work have rotten steps. So there was boards that were split, you know, and I had to be very careful about where I stepped. I didn't want to touch anything. There was a hand railing. I was terrified to touch the hand railing because I didn't know what was on it. So I was very carefully, very gingerly. I think I had to kind of turn my body sideways to get down these stairs without rubbing my shoulders on the wall, because I didn't want to bring any of this stuff home. I get down into the basement, and, you know, I'm looking at the ground primarily, and directly in front of me, I see a futon couch, and probably 3 feet in front of the futon couch was like a really nice flat screen TV on an entertainment center with like PlayStation, everything that you would need. It appears that the guy who had passed away was living in this basement. So there's his futon with all those blankets and pillows and stuff on it. The TV was on. The lights were actually on in the basement, and they were like those light bulbs hanging from a cord that you pull the string. Luckily, they were already on. So all I knew was that the guy was in the basement. So I shine my flashlight on his futon, on his TV, towards the back of the basement. I don't see anybody. And then that's when I started kind of looking around. I was looking for the lights and things like that. I looked up at the ceiling with my flashlight, and the ceiling had these brown stringy things hanging down all along the ceiling. Like as far as you looked into the basement, there were these brown and almost like cloth, brown spiky things hanging down from the ceiling. And then it dawned on me, I was like, these are like some kind of stalactites. Like when you go into a cavern and, you know, like you've seen the pictures on the internet of stalactites where you go into these deep caverns and there's these spikes coming down from the ceiling of mineral deposits and stuff, because the water is running down. The water has minerals in it. As the water goes down, the minerals stick to something solid. The water drops off, the mineral stays there. After thousands of years, these things turn into stalactites. And I'm looking up and I'm seeing these things, and it dawned on me, when you walked into the house and you were hit with that foul smell of animal waste, and then you walked into the living room and you felt the carpet and everything that had been going on with that carpet, and then you get in the basement and you look up, it just confirmed once again my original suspicion that animals have been going to the bathroom. It's animal waste has been piled up on that floor for so many decades that it's actually been dripping through the rafters in the basement. And these stalactites that were covering the ceiling of the basement all the way back as far as you could go were actually stalactites of decades of animal waste that had been deposited on the floor just above me. So now I'm in a basement with a low ceiling, and there's literal spikes of animal waste dripping down. I turned to my side and I saw the body back there. There was a large pile of laundry, and on the other side of this large pile of laundry, there was a washer and dryer, and the dead guy was back there. I looked back at him, and it was apparent that he overdosed and died in the laundry room, collapsed onto his hands and knees, and there's so much stuff in the basement that he died in that position. So he was on his hands and knees, and he died in that position, and it had been hours since anybody found him. It took hours to discover him. So when the family went down and they're on phone with 911, they're told to start CPR. They did their best to roll him over, but rigor mortis had set in. So he is now on his back with his hands out in the air, with full rigor mortis. His hands were in the air, and his legs were bent, and his knees were up in the air as well. I look back there. I see him there. He's dead. He's already been pronounced. I saw everything I needed to see. So I basically go running out of the house. I go upstairs and I talk to the parents, and they tell me that he has, at the time, it's probably heroin. I don't think fentanyl was such a thing back then. They tell me that he has a heroin problem, that he's relapsed recently, and that's probably what happened. So I was like, you know what? That's good enough for me. Back then, it was before we had the fentanyl explosion that we have now. We had to call homicide detectives, and they would come out and investigate overdose deaths. They no longer do that because there's too many overdose deaths for them to respond to. So I go out to the wagon. I get my cell phone. I call, and I remember I'm talking to this detective. He's retired now, a good friend of mine. His name is Glenn. And I tell him, you know, this guy overdosed in the basement. They're like, well, how do you know he overdosed? And I said, well, his family said that he's a drug user and he relapsed recently and he overdosed. They're like, well, did you find any evidence of an overdose? Because we're not coming out unless you have evidence of an overdose. I was like, no, I don't have any specific evidence. Just, you know, all the facts point to that. They're like, well, we need evidence. If there's no evidence of an overdose, then we're going to call this natural, and you can call the coroner and they're going to come out. So that means I had to go back down into the house. So I made my way through everything in the house. Had to step over that pile of laundry, which, you know, I was so worried that it was going to be full of fleas and bed bugs and stuff. That's why you don't brush up against surfaces in houses, because you don't want to bring that stuff home. But I had to step over all that, and I'm standing there looking over the body, and thank God, on top of the washing machine, I found his kit, you know, a spoon, lighter, tie off, needle. All right, there's my evidence that he just died of an overdose. Get the hell out of the house, go upstairs, call the detective. They said they were coming out. We had to wait a long time for detectives to come out. The detectives came out, and they also would bring crime scene investigators with them. We were standing outside with the family on the front porch for as long as we could until we were completely overwhelmed by the smell. And I remember sitting there trying to keep my composure because, you know, when somebody dies at home, it's the police officers that guide the family through the process. We make all the calls, we hang out with them until the body has been recovered by whatever service comes out to pick up the body. We try to be professional as possible, keep them calm, be strong for them. It means a lot to these families that that they're having a very horrible, tragic time. And then here we are in our nice, clean uniforms. We represent protection and an authority and all this other stuff. We represent the government, and they feel that, that the government is actually here to help us. It's a weird concept, but that's the vibe that I get from people. They're generally very appreciative of the police and the way we walk them through these processes. But we're standing out on the porch, and I remember this guy's mom, the dead guy's mom, looking at me and go, "Oh, I'm sorry about the mess. I meant to clean up earlier, but I didn't get a chance." And then the father tells me, "Yeah, we've been meaning to replace that carpet, but something came up and I had to spend the money on something else." And I'm looking at these people, and I didn't say anything. I think I just said, "No, we understand. We've been in dirty houses before." But I'm looking at him like, this isn't just like you forgot to clean up today. Like, you forgot to clean up the day your son was born 30 some years ago. It was nasty, but they live in this house. They go in this house every single day, and they spend the majority of their waking hours inside this disgusting house. This house is scarier than any haunted house attraction that you could go to. This was absolutely a terrible, terrible place to be. And you, as a regular citizen that doesn't do this for a living, would be amazed at the number of people that live their lives in this manner. It was so disgusting. We always joke with the crime scene investigators because, they have the stomach of a mountain goat, right? They don't lose it. They don't, they're used to dealing with rotting and decaying bodies and things that are disgusting and, severed limbs. And I mean, they deal with it all the time. If somebody dies in their home and isn't found for like 2 months, the crime scene investigators have to go in and gather evidence and stuff like that. They deal with this stuff a lot, and they're often making fun of us for the way we react when we smell things that we don't like and see things that are off-putting and stuff like that. When the crime scene investigator arrived, he basically came barreling out of this house, and he told me, he's like, "Yeah, we have to take pictures all the way into where the body is, and then take pictures around the body, so that we can kind of tell a story as part of our investigation." They have like really, really fancy digital cameras that take pictures very quickly. He basically told me that he just held his flashlight up and ran through the house going click, 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 went down the steps, click, 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 couple quick snaps of the body while he was holding his breath, and then came running out of the house. It's bad when the crime scene investigators have to come running out of a house. And I remember there's these private companies that come out and collect bodies for funeral homes, and they work for the funeral homes and they work for the coroner's office. They do everything. I usually, when they arrive on scene, I walk into the scene with them and I say, "You know what? He's down here. I'll walk you down there." And it's not completely uncommon for me to help them bag a body. Especially when you're new, you have to bag a lot of bodies. It's just something that helps you, kind of break through the uncomfortableness. Like, this is something that you're going to have to do. You're a police officer. You have to remain professional. You have to become accustomed to dealing with some of this stuff that normal people in society don't have to deal with. But on this particular day, they came up to me, and all the officers that were on scene had migrated out to the street. I was standing out by the wagon, because I couldn't even stand being up on that porch anymore. It was so disgusting. And when the body snatchers came, We basically told them, yep, it's in the basement. You go through the 2 rooms, you hang a right, hang another right, down the steps, have at it. Which the other thing that is really horrible that you don't really think about too often is when someone has been dead for a little while, if they die in an awkward position and full rigor mortis has set in, that body bag doesn't, if someone's got their arms and legs out like this, they're not going to fit in a body bag. So those people have to roll him over and flatten him out. That involves a lot of pressure, a lot of noises and things that you don't want. Often when you're moving bodies around like that, it's making me nauseous just thinking about it. There's a lot of bodily fluids and stuff that become expelled. It's a horrible, horrible job. Not something that I could ever do. But they had to go down there into that basement and deal with a body that's been there for 8 to 10 hours. They had to flatten him out, and then they carried him out. They were good sports about it. They come out, they put him on a gurney, put a decorative funeral blanket over the body, and then they tell the family they can come out and have a minute with him before they throw him on the hearse and get him out of there. They were very professional, did a very good job, but I feel horrible for what they had to go through that day. But yeah, I think that covers it, and we're like 26 minutes in. So that's going to be your what year is it? 2023 Halloween episode. The most disgusting scene in the worst dead body I have ever been on.